All right, everyone, so today we're going to be going over the FS700, the camera you guys just received. And we're going to go over how to attach your lenses, how to put on a microphone, and basically all these crazy buttons, what they do, and how you can use them. So we'll start out with the lens. So when you get the lens, you can take off the back cap, set that aside. Then we're going to take off the front cap to the camera. And now you have these little white dots. You have one there, and you have one on the lens. So we're just going to go ahead and line those up. And then you just spin till it clicks, and then you're good to go. We can take our lens cap off. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to stick your microphone on. I didn't grab the other piece. Someone quick grab the other piece out of the bag. There's other people here. It's not just me. So you're going to plug it into input 2. And then you have these two cold shoes that you can put the mic on. So we're going to put it right up here on top. So it just slides right in. You spin that to tighten it down. This opens, mic in, flip up, lock into place. Microphone's on. Your camera's built. We're pretty much ready to go. So we're going to fire it up. And then now we have our picture. And if you look over here, there's a little switch that says manual and servo. So if we switch that to servo, that allows us to use this zoom control. And this has a high, medium, and low setting. So if it's on low, you can see it creeps real slow. Medium, a little bit faster, and high, pretty fast. So that's how we're going to be controlling the speed if you're using this toggle. Now on this side of the camera, you have another toggle switch for your zoom. This is called a rocker, and this is decides your speed based on pressure. So the further you push it down, the faster it goes. The lighter you push it down, the slower it goes. So the zoom control speed that we just looked at earlier, up here, isn't going to have any effect when you're using the sidearm. Okay, so before we get too far, there's a switch over here that says auto manual. Now auto is going to put the whole camera into auto mode. So if you look at the screen here, you can see that everything has an A next to it. So that means that everything's on full auto. So the camera's doing whatever it wants to get the image it thinks is best. Now, we're not going to be using that a lot, or ever, because there's no fun in auto. You don't get to change the image and make it the way you want. So we're going to flip that back to manual, and you can see that everything goes back to the settings that I had it preset up at. So now we're just going to kind of start at the front of the camera and work our way back. So when this is switched to manual instead of servo for your zoom, this very first ring is going to control how far in or out you're zoomed. Okay? Then one ring back is going to be our focus ring, and that's going to show us, going to get our image in and out of focus. So those are two simple things, nothing real crazy. One step further back are our ND filters. Now, let me zoom back in on our chip chart here. So if you look at our chip chart, it looks pretty well exposed. It's not too bad. But let's say we're outside and it's too bright. So we will simulate that by increasing our ISO. We can flick on our ND filter, and it will cut down on the brightness. So once again, so that's without the ND. This is one stop of ND. And you can see in the lower left there, it tells you what ND you're on. And then as we keep going up, it just keeps taking away more and more light. So that way, when you're shooting outside, you can keep your iris a little more open, and there's less chance of, or that way you can have a better depth of field. So we're going to put our ISO back to 500. Double check our focus. And we're good. Okay? So now we're going to take one more step back, and now we're going to the iris area. So there's 3 different things that control your iris. So we have the iris push auto. So this button, when you push it in, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that an A appears as I push in the button, and then when I let go, it goes away. So if you just need a quick adjustment, and you don't want to use the scroll wheel, you can hit that once and it'll go through. So we'll mess with the ISO again to kind of give you an example. So you can see right now it's a little bit overexposed. So if I put the push iris, it changes it to a 7.1 instead of the 6.3 I had it, or vice versa. If I have it in f13, you can see it's quite a bit underexposed. But then I'm going to hit this button, and it's going to find the proper exposure for you. This is very helpful when you're doing white balance that we'll get to in a minute, to make sure that the white is properly exposed so the camera can figure out what color temperature to put you at. So then right underneath our push auto iris button is this little scroll wheel. And this scroll wheel is going to be what you use to make all of your iris adjustments. So just sliding it down will close the iris and make it darker, or pushing it up will open your iris and make it brighter. Now you notice that it stops at a f6.3. So when the lens is full zoomed in, that's the most open it can be. But you watch as we zoom out, have it on manual, as we zoom out to see all of our crew, we can actually open it up all the way to a 3.5. But as we zoom in, it will automatically close down for you. Okay? So that's just something you have to work around. If you're going to be doing a lot of zooms, the best move is to set everything for 6.3 and leave it there. So when you're full wide or you're at full zoom, either way, you're still getting a proper exposure. So you're not constantly having to go through and adjust your exposure if you're doing an E&G run and gun style shoot. And then right underneath our scroll wheel, we have this button that just says iris. So if we hit that button, it'll turn our iris into auto mode, where it's going to be full auto. And then you hit it again and it'll go out. So unlike earlier when we had this toggle switch back here that switched between auto and manual, when this is on auto, the whole camera's in auto. So if you just want the iris in auto for some reason, you hit that once, the little A appears, hit it again, it'll go away. So you're in full auto for your iris, and then we can take it right back off with just a push of one button. So now we're back one more step, and we're going to talk about our focus buttons. So once again, we have a push auto. So if you just need to grab quick focus on something, you push it. As you're holding it, it'll autofocus. When you let go, it'll stop focusing. And then you can go to full auto mode or manual mode. For focus, you really want to leave it in manual mode because something might get in front of the frame, or you might want to have something closest to the camera out of focus for aesthetic purposes. This allows you to have full control over your focus. You don't want it to constantly be shifting, trying to figure out what should be in focus based on what's taking up the most of the frame. So always keep that in manual mode. Auto mode is real bad. You'll not be happy with what you get out of it. So now we're going to come back a little bit further. Let me reframe up our chip chart a little bit. So first we're going to talk about peaking. So when I hit the peaking button, if you look at the screen, you can see these red lines appeared. So it outlines for you, block that a little bit better. It outlines for you what's in focus. So you can look at the screen, see those red lines, and know what's in focus. So if I throw it out of focus, you can see that the red lines all go away. And then as I slowly start bringing it in, you'll start to see the red lines appear, and then they'll get thicker the more in focus it is. So out of focus, no red lines. There's our focus. We know it's good. If you go too far, they start to get thinner. So you can really dial in your focus. Now, I like to keep it as red because it sets off from the background a lot. But if we go into our menu and we come down to our display setup and go to peaking, we can change that between red, white, and yellow. So it just kind of depends on your preference on which you want to use. Now you can also come in here and change how sensitive it is and how thick the lines get. Keeping it on high, especially as you guys are just getting started, is going to be the best way to see what you're looking at and get you going and keeping all your shots in focus. So right behind that, we have our histogram. So that's number 2 button. So you hit that, and you'll see on the screen, you get this little mountain peak guy. So that's showing you the levels of your frame from left to right. So all the way to the left is going to be 0 IRE, which is the electronic scale that they measure light by. And all the way to the right is going to be your pure white. So black all the way to the left, pure white all the way to the right. So if we flip our ISO and make it higher, you can see how everything starts shifting towards the right. And let's see, we'll just really go crazy. And you can watch. So you can see how everything's way over to the right. And then if we just stop it all down, it can go way over to the left. Now it's real faint, but you can see a line on the right side of your histogram. So we'll jump right down below to zebra. Zebra stripes are going to show you what is exposed at certain levels of IRE. Okay, so if we come into menu, and we go to display, zebra, we can set that level. So 70 IRE is kind of where you want the highlights on people's faces. So the tops of their cheeks, the tops of their forehead, this is where you want that zebra striping to appear. So when we're looking at this, if I turn the zebra striping on, you'll see that that white up on top there has these zebra stripes on it. So that's saying that that white is exposed pretty much for 70 IRE. Let's just go up a little bit on our ISO here. So you can see they went away there, and you can see this line to the far right, that straight line that goes right up. That's going to be that white line. So as I bring it down, and you start to see these zebras appear, it's going through and showing us what's exposed at 70 IRE. So you can go through, and that way you have just a quick reference for if your image is exposed right or not. And you can adjust that. So if we wanted to say, know that if our sky is being blown out or not, we can come under zebra, we can come in here, and we can change it to 90. So that means that if it has the zebra stripes on it, it's right at the edge of about to be overexposed. So it just gives you a nice frame reference to know whether or not your image is exposed properly and what you can do to kind of adjust that. It's a real great tool for getting your image exposed properly. Why is this so wobbly? So next we have face detection. I don't have any faces today, but what that'll do is it'll help you find faces in your frame when you're using autofocus. It'll go through and find the face and kind of keep track of it. That's right here. Once again, that's more of a consumer tool. That's not something we're going to be using a lot because we want to have full control over our image. We never want the camera to do things that we can do ourselves, such as focus, aperture, things of that nature. It's not a good move. You don't want the camera thinking for you. You want to think for the camera. So we already went over zebra. Your marker button will actually just add a marker to the center of your frame. So if you look at the right to the left of your histogram there, and it doesn't show up on this feed you're getting. Oh, it does for a second. You get that little hash mark. So if you were looking at the camera, that little hash mark that popped up in the middle there, that guy would just stay there. And it just gives you a frame of reference so you can kind of see how your things are framed. You know where the center of frame is. It's nice. We have last scene, which is our next button over here. And this is going to just pull up the last thing we shot. So if you're on set and you have to do a quick playback, hit last scene. It'll pull up the last clip you shot. The director can look at it, tell you how great you did, and you can move on. So now we're going to jump down here. We're going to go over the gain ISO button. So this, like our iris and our focus button, we can turn our gain and ISO on auto. So if we push it once, you'll see that the A appears next to the ISO, and it moves it all the way up to 2500. We hit it to where we wanted it. It's a 1600. This is a real dangerous button because the camera likes lots of light, especially when in auto mode. So if you keep that on, you're going to end up in those real high ISOs, and you're going to get lots of noise and grain, and your image isn't going to look professional anymore. It won't have that crisp, clean look to it. Next to it, we have our white balance button. So once again, this is how we toggle between auto white balance and manual white balance. Now if I zoom out a little bit, and you watch the blacks on the side of the chip chart there, you can see that when it's in auto, it warms it up a little bit. You can see the shift in color temperature quite a bit. I like my image a little warmer, so it looks a little nicer. It keeps the whites a little more clean. So that's that. So auto, and then the last button on the side here is your shutter speed, and once again, that will turn you to auto. So you can see the little A appears. It can also, it'll highlight it like that, and that allows you to manually make changes with the little scroll wheel that's right here. So as you toggle that up and down, it'll go between the different available shutter speeds that you have. Okay? The rule of thumb for when you're just starting out is to double your frame rate. So right now we're shooting at 30 frames a second, so we have that doubled up to 60. If you're shooting 24, it's going to be 48. If you're shooting 60 frames, it's going to be 120, so on and so forth. And then later on, throughout the classes, we'll teach you how you can use the shutter speeds to kind of add a stylized look to your videos. So now we're going to jump down. This is your S and Q button. This is going to be how you do your slow motion and your different frame rates. We're not going to go over that today. That'll be in an advanced video that you'll get later on in the program. Next to that, we have our L, M, and H toggle switch. This is going to be how you change between the 3 preset ISOs you have. So you have your low, your medium, and your high. So if we go into our menu and we go up to our camera set and we go to ISO set, now you'll see that there's a thing here that says gain ISO select. You can change between gain and ISO depending on which one you want to look at. For the purposes of this school, we go by ISO. So you'll go to your ISO set, and then you'll see you have your L, M, and H in here as well. And you can change them to be whatever you want them to be, from 500 all the way up to 16,000. So the lower the number here, the less grain you're going to have. And then you can just kind of go through and select and go through and find which one works the best for you. If you're outside, you're always going to be at 500. From my experiences, anything over 3200 no longer has that crisp HD, nice professional look to it. It has too much noise and too much grain, and it just kind of starts to look degraded, and it's not really that nice of an image anymore. So try and keep under that if you can. If you have to go higher than that, it means you need to get out your light kit, and you're going to need to do some work to get the image that you want. So right next to that, we have our white balance setting area. So you have preset A and B. So if we go into the menu again, we're going to come down here to our white balance preset, and you have 3 options. You have outdoor, indoor, and manual white balance temperature. Outdoor is going to lock it in at a 5600 area. So that's in the Kelvin scale. And for fun information, the way they came up with the colors for the Kelvin scale is they take a solid block of carbon and heat it to those temperatures in Kelvin. So the solid block of carbon at 5600 degrees Kelvin will be blue. It's kind of the same color as the sun. At 3200 degrees Kelvin, it's going to be more orange and more warm, like in a household incandescent bulb. So if you're shooting a lot indoors or outdoors, you would set your preset to outdoor. If you're shooting a lot indoors, you would leave it in indoor, just so you have a quick, ready-to-go, easy access. I like to keep it at manual white balance temperature, and this allows you to manually dial in the Kelvin temperature you want. So you're not stuck with that 5600 or that 3200. You can kind of go through and pick what you like and what looks better. So I'll show you real quick how we can do a white balance. You want to use a white card when you're doing your white balances. We're going to scoot the camera forward just a little bit and hose all the people that are shooting this. So you want to fill the frame with white. Can you pull the color card out, Funk? You don't want it to see any color because it'll take that color and try to white balance to that. So the black on the sides is fine. If you go to your local Photoshop and pick up a gray card you can also use to white balance. It's 18% gray. Any of those will work fine. So you'll notice that it was a lot brighter. So I had it at an 8. So you can see the white's real blown out. So if I come over to the side, I'm going to take this toggle switch. This is preset A and B, and I'm going to switch it to A. Now this will allow me to manually balance the camera. And you're going to use this little button right here. That's 2 triangles with a square. and you're going to push that button, and it's going to manually put in the color temperature that it thinks it should be. And I wanted it to error out, so we're going to change our ISO here. So what can happen is if you're not exposed properly and you hit the button, you're going to notice it just says error down on the lower right. That's because there's too much information. It's blown out. It doesn't know what to do with the levels. So if we flip that down, so we get a decent exposure again, and we hit the little triangle with 2 triangles with a square button again, you'll see that it pops up and says 3000 Kelvin. So that's what we had it at when we were in our preset. So we did pretty good. We matched what the camera thought we should have. But what you can see is, so I did that with A. So if I flip this back to 3000 and I push this little triangle, 2 triangles with a square button again, you'll see that the 3000K is now highlighted. And now I can go through and I can manually dial in the temperature that I want. So, and that's just using the execute. You can use the scroll wheel on the side to do it, or you can use the D-pad on top of the camera. And that way you can just manually dial in the color temperature you are looking for. So we'll put it back at 3000. So those are the kind of 3 different ways that you can go through and white balance your camera. Super easy, right? So now we have your menu button. There's also the exact same button on the top of the camera. So if we hit the menu button, it just pulls up the standard menu. So if you we'll just go through the menu real quick. So the first one is your camera set. This is where you're going to be changing all of your settings for the camera. So your gain ISO, your auto ISO limit. So like before when we were talking about how after 3200 it stops looking like a nice clear image. We can set this to 3200 and now the camera will never go past that. Even if it thinks it needs more light, it won't go past that. White balance preset we went through. Your outdoor level, you can kind of cheat it. So if you have it set to the preset for outdoor, you can say, I like to shoot a little warmer outside, so let's take some blue out and we'll go -3. Or, I like it to be a little cooler, so I bump it up. But if you're going to be doing that, it's way easier to go through and to manually dial in the temperature you want. If you want to dial it in the menu, you can do it in here as opposed to doing it on the side with the scroll wheel. Your black balance. Your black balance is what you use if there's a bad pixel in the camera. So let's say you're seeing a little dot in your frame and you can't quite figure out what that dot's from. Odds are there's a pixel that's having some issues. So you use the black balance, the camera will go through, it'll look at it pixel by pixel, line by line, and figure out what isn't right, because it knows the image is supposed to be black. So if we do it real quick, and we say we want to do a black balance, so it says attach the lens cap. So we'll stick the lens cap on there so that it's getting pure black. We'll hit yes. And it'll go through and just say executing. And it'll go through and it'll look at all the pixels line by line until it can verify that all the pixels look right. Now it can take a while because there's a lot of pixels. So it goes through, it just pops up, it'll say completed. We'll hit OK, and we'll know that we're good to go. And we can zoom back in on our chip chart. All right. Your auto exposure your auto exposure shift. This will allow you to say when you're auto exposing, either bring it up or bring it down a little bit. The same idea as with the color balance. It just allows you to make some changes so that if it's auto setting your iris, you can tell it, hey, keep it a little darker than you would think, or brighten it up a little bit more than you would think. Menu, get out of there. Your zoom set, so if you want the speed to always be 1 speed as opposed to variable, you would just change this to fixed. Variable tends to work a little bit better, so we leave it there. Steady shot. You'll notice I have steady shot turned off. And the reason behind this is that the steady shot is always trying to keep your shot from looking like it's shaking or wobbling. And what happens is if you're set up for a steady shot on a tripod and you're doing a nice pan and the background elements look very similar, what'll happen is it'll start going and then it'll stop and it'll jump, or you'll get to your end position and it'll keep floating. So if you're ever on a tripod, you want to turn steady shot off to just make sure that you keep your image looking nice. You get the move you want and you don't have to worry about that weird jumping or sliding effect. You're slow and quick. Once again, we'll go over this in when we get to the advanced video, but this is going to be your slow motion settings area. This is for changing your focus. You can set up focus times so that it doesn't shift quite as fast when it's changing focuses in auto mode. Nothing you really need to worry about. You're going to be doing most of your focus stuff with your manual settings. You're not going to be using the camera to do that. Spot focus allows you to pick where you want to focus. So if we zoom out, and I want the monitor in the back to be focused, I just touch the screen and it figures out where it should be in focus. Or I touch the C stand over here, and you can see down where it says focus, it's changing the distances. So if I touch the screen up on those boxes, it changes it to infinity. So it just kind of, it's a weird way because you're touching the camera to set your focus distances, but it's available. It's there if you want it. So we're gonna get out of that because we don't like that. All right. I think that was it for that menu. If you want to make small changes to your autofocus, we can turn that on. We don't. Once again, we're not going to really worry about that. And then color bars. If you ever need to set up a monitor, you turn these on, and it'll let you set up a monitor. It lets you make sure your colors look right, your contrast is set up right. Make sure the monitor just basically looks as it should for what you're feeding it from the camera. All right, so now we're going to jump down here one. We're going to do, this is your record and your video out settings. So for record set, this is where we can come in and change it between all the different settings that we have available. So you can go in here and change how it's going to record. So we can set up to record RAW. We can set it up to record HD or SD. For most of the time here, you're going to be setting it up to record in HD. And then we will be using our different frame rates. So these 24p FX and 30p FX are going to be what you do 90% of your shooting in. They're kind of the standard frame rates right now. They'll allow you to do your slow motion, fast motion, stuff like that. 24p has a more filmic look. 30p is somewhere in between 24p and 60. The 60i that you would see on like a soap opera. So it's a little smoother, not quite as choppy. It's a little easier to work with when you're first starting out. So we'll say okay to that. And then you can have simultaneous record if you have a separate recorder behind the camera. They offer a separate record unit as well as a hard drive unit that you can put on the side. But we don't need either of those. So we'll turn that off. Your media select, you can tell it if you're using FMU is the hard drive that you can add to the side. You're going to be using the memory card, the SD card that we gave you. So hit OK there. And then for your video out, that gives you the different output settings for when you're sending to monitor. So with this camera, you have 3 different types of HD that you can output. You have your SDI cable, your HDMI cable, and your 3-wire component cable. So these settings will all change how it outputs. So for the switcher that we're using today, it can't handle a 1080p signal. It can only handle a 1080i. So we have 1080i going out, but you can change that up to 1080p, 720p, 1080i, 480p, 480i, all the standard settings. You can tell it to output actual 24p or 30p. You can have it 60p with a pull down. You can have it where it does the flagging of different frames. but we're going to do a true 24 30p. Your down convert type is if it's sending it to a monitor that isn't built for widescreen. So you can letterbox it, you can cut off your sides, or you can squeeze it. If you squeeze it, the monitor you're using will have to have a way of unsqueezing it. So just remember that. Same with your SD wide convert. You have the same three options. You can turn your time code through the HDMI on or off. And then you can tell it to record to your separate deck if you get one through the HDMI cable or the SDI cable. So it'll actually, when you hit record on the camera, if we had that simultaneous record turned on, it'll start the roll on your separate recorder as well. Then we have our audio settings. So we can go in here and we can change it to Dolby or linear PCM. We'll leave it at linear PCM. You can put a limiter on the audio. You don't really want to put the limiter on. We'll leave that off. Your headphone out, you can do stereo or mono, depending if you want to listen to one channel or two channels. And then you have individual trims and wind cuts for your two different inputs. There's two audio inputs on the camera. One is right up front by where you're going to put the microphone in, and the other one is on the side of the camera, right next to on the opposite side of all your menu buttons. And then in the display set, we went through a lot of these already. So this is where your histogram zebra settings, your marker settings are all located. Now, this is a new one that we haven't went over yet. It's expanded focus. And you can come in here and say if you want it to be one push for 4 magnification or 2 pushes for 8, or if you want it to always be 8 or if you want it to always be 4. And when we're done going through the menus, I'll show you how to use the expanded focus buttons. But we want to leave it where you can zoom in twice. So times 4 magnifications times 8 is great. Camera data display, this is going to change what you see on your main screen here. We want to leave that on because if we decide we don't want to look at it, over here on the side we have this display button. And we can hit that and it'll take, as we hit this display button, it'll change what we see on the screen. So if we hit it once, it gets rid of some of the information. We hit it twice, we get a nice clean image. So pop back into the menu. So here's this. Where do we stop? We did peaking, we did that. Data display, okay. Audio level display just shows the 2 little XLR guys at the bottom over here on the right where it says channel 1 and channel 2. Our zoom display, we can change it between number or bar. You want to leave this on number because bar doesn't give you any information. So if we look at the top here, let's switch this to servo. As we start to zoom, it just says W and T for wide and telephoto, but we have no idea any type of reference for that. Okay, so we want to leave that on number. So if we change that back over to number, and then we pop out of that menu. Now you can see there's a number, so we can reference what we're at. So if you're out doing a shoot and you're at Z78 and you need to recreate that same shot because something went wrong with the acting or something along those lines, you can come in and you can match up the Z number to match what you shot earlier. So if we come back in here, focus display, meters or feet depending on what you're used to. This will tell you how far away from the camera is in focus. Most of you will probably keep it on feet. So if you look down in the lower left, you'll see that little hand. As we change it, it'll tell us how many feet away from the camera is in focus. So once again, this is for, you're going to get a much more accurate result from this than you are from guessing. So if you get out your tape measure and you attach it to this little nub right here, you can see a little circle with a line through it and then a little spot to actually attach your tape measure. That's where you're going to measure from. So you can measure from there to your actual subject, and you can dial in that distance on the camera, and you'll know what you're shooting is in focus. Shutter display, you can put it in seconds or degrees. Degrees is from the film world, where the shutter was a physical instrument that spun and exposed the film for a certain amount of time. So it does it in degrees, either 180, which means it's exposed for half the time the frame is there. You can do 90, so on and so forth. Or you can do seconds, and it just kind of depends on what background you're from to which one you're going to prefer. So that doesn't really matter. It's just more of what you know and what you like. We can change the brightness of the LCD, and then we can change the display output. So right now I have it set to all output so that you guys can see what I'm doing in the menus. So if I hit this to just LCD panel, you can see that everything disappears. This is what you're going to want to have it set to if you're on set and a client is looking at your monitor. You don't want them to see all of the stuff that you're looking at. Just because, you know, it's gonna bother them. They're not gonna know what they're looking at. They're gonna see all the stuff in the frame, and it's gonna get annoying for them. All right, so now we're gonna come over here to our time code. You can set it up a few different ways. So you have your time code preset. This is if you want to dial in a specific number. So right now you can see it's just a random number at the top. It says 209-1720. So we're recording this at 11:25 in the morning. So we can actually set this to time of day so that you know what time of day you shot your images. So if we change this to 11:25:00, we'll hit OK. So that sets our preset. You can see the number changed at the top. Now, if we're not rolling, those numbers aren't going to move. So we're going to come down here to timecode run. We're going to say free run. So now I have a constant locked number that corresponds with the time of day. So you'll know what time of day you shot that image. This is especially great if you're going to be shooting multi-camera. You can set both cameras up to the same time. When you get to post, you can sync them up by time code. That way you're not worrying about whether or not the cameras are in sync by sound and all these other different things. You know that the time codes are the same. That way they're going to be good to go. Your UB preset, you can change the user bit is what it's called. It's basically a way of taking notes and time code that you can see in post. So you can set this like every one is a new card, things like that. Your timecode format, you have drop frame and non-drop frame. And this has to do with whether or not you're going to be going to broadcast. So your drop frame is going to knock off a frame every so often to account for broadcast standards. Your non-drop frame is not going to do that. Timecode make, we're going to go over in the more advanced class. And then you can turn the user bit time record on or off. And now we're getting down to kind of the riffraff of the camera settings. So this is where all of your kind of generic stuff that doesn't have a place in the other places are going to be. So you can change what the S and Q button does, whether it's regular slow-mo or super slow-mo or both. We're not going to worry about the 4K stuff. Your assign button. So over here on the side, you'll notice that all the buttons we talked about earlier have a number next to them as well as what they are. So if we never use face detection for number 3, we can come in here to number 3 and we can change it to any number of different things that we want it to do. We use color bars a lot, so we're going to change number 3 to color bars. So now when I come out here and I come to my face detection button and I hit it, you can see that color bars came up instead of it going into face detection mode. Very useful to be able to change the buttons around to what you want. It makes the camera more customizable and it makes it more readily available to do the things you want it to do based on your workflow. So we can come in here and we can change it for any of the different buttons that are available. Clock set, you just set up the date and time. For timestamps, you can tell it where in the country you are based on Greenwich Mean Time. So we're on the East Coast, so we're -5 from Greenwich. You can change the language of the camera. So if you speak French or English simple, you can put either of those on. The camera makes beeping noises when you're going through menus. It's a good idea to keep that turned off. You don't want the camera constantly beeping as you're going through it. You can turn the record lamps on. I recommend keeping the front record lamp off. People seeing that red light tend to freeze up. It's just a little dot that is right here. So right there. So it's just a little dot right there that lets people know you're recording. Then you have the record lamp rear, which you want to keep on so that you can see it. We'll be going over the SW mode in the advanced courses. Your remote control, you got a little remote control with your camera. This turns the IR receiver on and off. If you're shooting for 50i, so if you're overseas, you can change it. It's a multi-continent camera, so you can change between 60i and 50i. Media format, this is going to be how you format your card. So you just come in here, memory card. I don't have a card in there, but you just hit OK there. It'll ask you to verify that you want to lose all your information. You'll say yes. Repair image database file. This is very important. Sometimes your memory card will get corrupted. You'll put it in here, and it'll say no card found, or it won't recognize the card. It won't let you record, things like that. Come in here to repair image database. It'll go through and it'll fix the card. Now, make sure you back up your footage before you do this, because you might lose some of that information. So you want to make sure that you're all clear there. Your USB connect, we don't have to do that right now. Get out of there. Is going to be how you're going to do firmware updates in the future when some come out. So you'll go in there, turn that on. It'll allow you to connect the camera to the computer. You can see how long the camera's been used, and you can see what model number and what version number your camera's at. And that's about it. So now we just have a few more things to go over, and I'll let you stop listening to my boring droning. And we're going to spin the camera around. And we'll look at the other side of the camera for a second here. So up top here, and you know what, let me just pop this off. So we're just going to pop this off real quick so it's a little easier for us to get around. So up top, you're going to see there's a mode button. And this way, there we go. You're going to see there's a mode button. And then there's a picture of a film strip, and then a picture of a camera. If you push this button, it'll switch which one is highlighted. So if you want to do still photos, you will switch to the photo mode. So you can come up here and you can see that it crops the sides of the frame. So if we go into our menu and we get a different set of menu options, so we can come in here and we can say our image size, and we can say we want it to be 16 by 9, so it stays looking like the other images that we've taken with video. Okay, so now we have that set up so we can see a 16 by 9 image on our screen. And then if we come over here and you look right there, there's a little button on your handle that says photo. So when you click, yeah, so you can see over here on the side there's a button that says photo right here. So it's just a little round button right here on your hand control. It's only on the hand control. So when you hit that button, it will tell you to insert a memory card, but it'll take a snapshot of that image. So you can take still images with your camera as well, which will be very helpful when you're trying to do storyboards or do blocking, so you don't have to scrub through the footage and do frame exports. So we're going to hit this button again. Sorry. We're going to hit this button again, and we'll see it switch back to the film strip. So now we're back in video mode. And I'm going to hit this button right next to the photo button, and it says expanded focus. So we set that up earlier to be 4x magnification as well as 8x magnification. So I'm going to push the button, and you're not going to be able to see exactly what it does, but you can see there's these arrows and a little red box. So right now on the LCD screen, it's showing me a 4x magnification, so I'm seeing only what's inside that red box. And then if I move with the D-pad on top of the camera, I can pick different parts of the frame to look at and see if that part of the frame is in focus. So I think I got it at 4x, but I can push that button one more time, and you'll see how much smaller that red box got. Now I'm only looking at that much of the image to double check my focus. It's a great way to make sure that your images are in focus. Aside from the peaking, you want to use both. You want to be as sure as you can be that the image is in focus, because an out of focus image is not worth anything. So that kind of goes through the whole camera, how to use it, some of the basic menu settings. If you have any questions, let us know. We'll be more than happy to go over any of it, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. See you later.